Hi, my name's Rosalie Stromme, and I'm here to do a book review for the Fairhope Public Library. And the book I've chosen is this book. It's called The Dragon Behind the Glass. It's nonfiction, a true story of power, obsession, and the world's most coveted fish by Emily Voigt. This book was a finalist in 2017 for the E.O. Wilson Literary Science Award Writing Prize. It didn't win, but it was a finalist. It's a book about fish. Her original interest in fish as an author was when she was 16 years old. She had a goldfish bowl, and she had a goldfish in it. And that was all that she had. And the goldfish, she noticed, was quite bored. It didn't move or do anything at all. So she went down to a local aquarium store and purchased the little castles that you get and the plastic palm frond, and put that into the goldfish bowl so that the fish would have something to do all day long. Well, instantly she put them in there, and the fish just went swimming and swimming and happily frolicking about the bowl. And when she awoke the next morning, the fish was dead. Apparently the bacteria that had been brought in on the palm frond plastic had killed the fish. And that began her love of fish. The book talks about this coveted fish, and this fish, her exploration comes to the point of understanding how this unknown fish 50 years ago that none of us had ever heard of or seen becomes a $300,000 fish in today's aquarium market. And she goes through the exploration, not only an intellectual exploration, but also a travel exploration to figure out how this came to be. First, I'm going to talk to you about the arowana itself. You'll see a photo of the super red arowana. This is the fish that we're going to talk about in this book. Just some facts about the arowana, which I, of course, know nothing about. It's called the dragonfish, and it is also known as the Asian arowana. It's 2 to 3 feet long. It brings prosperity and good fortune, and it wards off evil harm to those who own it. It is one of the most ancient fish on Earth. It has a very long tongue with long, prickly spines on it. Its habitat is along the equator, along South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, New Guinea, and Australia. It lives for decades. It jumps 5 to 6 feet out of the water to catch its prey in air. It takes a moment to comprehend. It mates for life, and the courtship between a pair lasts for months. It produces very few offspring. The eggs incubate in the male's mouth for up to 6 months before they become hatchlings. The arowana is protected currently by the Endangered Species Act and cannot be legally brought into the United States. So that's a little bit about the fish. The book also has a brief history of pets, pet ownerships, and interesting aspects of zoos. In 1829, the first plant terrarium was invented in London. Boring. And so in 1850, Londoners decided to put water and fish into bowls to make it more interesting to look at. In the 1890s, the first American pet shop was opened. Fast forward to 1976, aquarium fish sales in 1976 totaled about $21 million. In the 1980s, wild birds became the hot topic for black market trading in wildlife. In 1989, the first ever Aquarama was held. An Aquarama is the World Expo of people competing for best in show fish. That's 1989. Keep track of that number, that date. In 1990s, there was a global treaty for countries around the world that every country has all sovereign rights over their own biological resources. In 2009, 20 years after the first Aquarama, our super red arowana became the grand champion. but it can only be found in the wild in a deep Borneo lake. It's the only place you can find it. Now, the book was written in 2017. In 2017, the entire fish aquarium industry globally is worth $15 billion. For the last 10 years, the top prizes at the Aquarama have been odd things. Albino fish, fish with two heads, fish with two tails, odd fin arrangements, not natural. There was an interesting cottage industry of cosmetic plastic surgery for fish competitions, including fin jobs, jaw tucks, and you can tattoo fish to make them unique to win Best in Show. The highest sale of our arowana that I showed you sold for $300,000 to a Taiwanese owner of a company that makes Barbie doll hair. Normal buyers on regular sales will spend $1,500 on baby arowana and $150,000 for adult. Because this species is endangered, I'm going to read a little bit from the book. A French biologist sought to quantify how humans value rarity by measuring the hassle visitors to a zoo in Paris would endure to see certain animals, how much they'd pay, how many stairs they'd walk up, and whether they'd dart through a sprinkler to see it. The researchers found that people spent about twice as long looking for a frog or gecko marked as rare than they would for the same frog or gecko marked as common. It's an interesting side note. 20,000 years ago, of course, all animals were wild, but now only 3% of terrestrial vertebrates on Earth are still wild. 97% are now in some form of captivity or human control. So I said that our story starts with the journalist following a New York State Environmental Conservation Police investigator on busts. And this particular bust, they were going after a business model with the name Mr. Anything Man. And Mr. Anything Man could get you any animal, dead or alive, at any price. But she's really more interested in the arowana. She wants to focus in on the arowana. So after covering that beat for the newspapers that she wrote for, she decided that she was going to do some heavy-duty investigative journalism to come to the essence of this particular story. And I'm just going to cover a few quick laws to see where we have come from when we never heard of arowana to where we are now. In 1911, the U.S. passed the first international treaty protecting wild animals because we were beating seals to death. In 1930, the U.S. banned the transport of wildlife taken in violation of country laws. In 1975, the CITES, that's what it's called, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, that's our endangered species list beginnings. The list was published, and our arowana was on it. In 1990, 15 years later, demand for owning endangered species grew so fast that farmers started commercially farming the arowana, and CITES moved the arowana from endangered to go ahead and sell it, as long as it was produced on a farm. In 1991, this had the effect of driving up the prices exponentially for wild arowana, making the indigenous tribes profit from selling their original food source. Then fish poachers moved in to get a piece of the money pie. Turns out, in 1995, 20 years after going onto the endangered species list, the arowana went off, and then in 1995 it went back on. And only farmed arowana can be sold. Each marijuana that was farmed were microchipped to verify their authenticity. And so now in 2017, the arowana is a very unique species. It's a mass-produced endangered species. CITES' position says that a captive fish is the same as a dead fish from a conservation point of view. Farming fish removes the economic incentive to protect nature because farm fish lowers the price, thereby increasing the popularity to the average aquarium worker. Back to the author and her excitement of traveling to see the arowana. She decides that she wants to see the super red arowana in Borneo. The last super red arowana was seen in 1993, after the Aquaramo fish show created its popularity. She never found one there, but she did see that this fish's popularity and the dollars it brought in to the indigenous people around that one lake in Borneo improved their lifestyle. They had indoor plumbing, they had communication networks, they had asphalt roads, even though the habitat itself had been destroyed. She hears a rumor of a brand new, as yet undiscovered arowana in Myanmar. And you'll see a photo of it here. It's called the batik arowana. So she travels there to see it in the wild. This is how she talks about traveling to Myanmar. Myanmar has one of the highest incidences of lethal snake bites in the world. Virtually all the country's venomous snakes are most active at night. In 2001, an author named Slowinski was surveying reptiles and amphibians in the foothills of the Himalayas when a many-banded crate bit his finger, injecting him with a powerful neurotoxin. Over the next 29 hours, as 14 fellow scientists and 4 Burmese field assistants performed artificial respiration and radioed for a rescue helicopter that the government failed to send, Slowinski gradually succumbed to paralysis until he spelled out his final message: "Let me die." King cobras, speculated cobras, monocled cobras. Myanmar has so many snakes that some don't even have names yet. Rendering such hazards even more dangerous is the general lack of infrastructure and telecommunications. I read that the country had fewer cell phones per capita than North Korea. But she decides to go there anyway. But in order to identify a new species to the world, a specimen must be caught and killed and examined by a professional ichthyologist. So the author bought 2 dead batik arowana for $250 from the back of an SUV from a market vendor in Myanmar. And she had them shipped to the British Museum and Natural History. She never did see one in the live. She then decides, all I really want to do is to see one jump in the air, catch prey, and land back in the water. So she ends up traveling in the end to the bowels of the Amazon, and she ended up getting her wish to see a non-endangered, very common silver arowana in the wild, and that was very successful for her search for that fish. So the moral of our story there are 4 morals. To quote from the book, the quickest way to transform a species into a luxury item, thereby ensuring its extinction, is to declare it officially protected by law. Number 2, commercial breeding of an endangered species actually increases its demand because it becomes affordable to more people. And number 3, as far as conservation is concerned, we should protect the environment and not the animals. Let the species take care of themselves. And my final question that she has in her book is this one. In recent years, a divide has emerged among conservation biologists regarding which species are most important to protect. Ones from such active lineages whose preservation secures the future of adaptation and speciation, or the oldest species, such as the arowana. On the one hand, the arowana is unique to the world, the remnant of a bygone era. On the other hand, it's an evolutionary dead end, having changed little in more than 100 million years. Which is more important, holding on to life's history or facilitating its future? Thank you for listening, and I strongly recommend this book.